Welcome back to Podcast Recovery, everyone. We are your hosts, David O.
Oh, we're doing hosts.
Yeah.
So Eric V.
And Eric
guys.
V. Yeah. Our other esteemed ghost, host, Carly, is
Tell us how you really feel.
Is in Florida watching some Grapefruit League baseball. So good for her.
Some what?
Grapefruit League baseball? Orioles training camp stuff?
What do you mean by grapefruits, though? How do grapefruits come into the equation?
Because it's Florida and they grow grapefruits.
Was that the name of the league? Is it
yes, it's called the Grapefruit League.
Literally.
Huh. Okay. I learned a new thing. Go ahead.
There you go. And today we're joined by two of our very special guests, very good friends of mine, Martin and Jack. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well. How about you?
I'm doing well, man.
Happy to be back.
Good, indeed.
Always good to be back.
Yeah.
Real quick, where are you guys from?
Baltimore City.
I guess Central Maryland.
But you're like a transient.
Yeah, I'm not going to answer that question.
Well,
I'm living in Ellicott City right now.
That's true.
Yeah, I'm from Columbia. I live in Columbia.
Yeah, there we go.
Born and raised in Baltimore.
Yeah, Maryland. We're all from Maryland.
Maryland.
When were you first introduced to recovery?
2013.
Yeah, 2011.
And how long have you guys been clean?
Since then. It's coming up on 10 years now.
Huh.
Yeah, and it'll be June 13th. June 18th.
Are all three of us one-timers?
I am, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a one-timer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How's it going over there, retread?
I think I'm doing pretty well.
You are doing well.
Yeah.
As he looks at the ceiling.
Right.
Yeah, Eric fails upwards. All right. So today we are doing a very special podcast. Today we're focusing on recovering housing and basically further treatment beyond just necessarily the quote-unquote 28-day model or however you come into recovery, basically getting into sober living, the importance of it. And I want to go around the table for you two. I'm going to start with you, Martin. Just do a quick 5-minute background of your experience with recovery housing and how it affected your recovery.
Sure. So to keep it as brief as possible, I am a one-timer as far as, going through rehab once. Mm-hmm. I was lucky enough that there was a girl at the psych ward that I went through before I got to Massey Treatment Center who actually introduced me to someone that had owned a recovery house, which back in 2013 certainly was not as prevalent as it was now. And I actually managed to stay in touch with them throughout my entire stay at rehab. And I was terrified of the idea because in my mind, going to a recovery house meant, sort of like these stories that I'd heard of halfway houses, which, was more prevalent for people coming out of jail. So I'm expecting there to be, this criminal element that I'm going to be, intimidated and my stuff's going to be stolen. And, that I'm basically, my only option is to get out of rehab and go into, the lowest rung of housing. Right.
Yeah.
But I didn't really have any better option. And, going back to try to live with a family member or somebody where there would be, alcohol in the house, I was just desperate enough to take the suggestions. And the guy on the phone, he sounded like he cursed a lot and he sounded like a really down to earth guy.
Yeah.
I pictured him wearing a leather jacket for some reason.
Yeah.
And thankfully I said yes. I just kept taking the suggestions, right? That I was, so I went. So I went to this house and it was actually in Columbia, Maryland, which is a nice area in Maryland. And it was a big house. And I feel like I owe the rest of my commitment to recovery on that house because I was around a group of other people. And there's lots of stories I can tell because obviously
was that Mike and Joni's house?
That was Mike and Joni's house and Jack was there with me.
Should
I moved
we mention
in
the name or not?
Yeah, sure.
The Donnelly house?
Yeah, we can mention the Donnelly house. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. They've been around for a long time. They have a website up and everything. So,
anybody listening in Nebraska that has no idea what the Donnelly house is. They're like, what?
Yeah. So
either way, you're welcome. Come from Nebraska.
For sure.
Yeah. It usually stays filled anyway. But yeah. So I was lucky enough to get in there, and Jack was there, and a couple of other guys who had more clean time than I did, and were willing to make suggestions and I think, when I look back on it now, probably the most important part of it was that on the bad days, when I was isolating, when I didn't know what to do with the depression and anxiety, that there was somebody else there in the house that was willing to knock on the door and say, we haven't seen you in a while. What's going on?
Yeah. You're kind of forcing your uncomfort, your discomfort.
I wasn't invisible anymore. Right. And I had been alone and trapped and invisible for so long that's what made the difference. And it wasn't so bad, right?
You had a dog
that somebody
and a
called me out.
mannequin.
I sure did. I sure did. So, and for me,
emphasis on mannequin.
yeah.
Manny.
Yes, and we got to bring Manny up. I didn't look up my episodes numbers because I was going to give a throwback again to the other episode.
I think you're episode 4, and I do remember your mannequin.
Yeah.
Nice,
I've
right.
met your mannequin. Yeah.
Manny's amazing.
Yeah. So, and from there, basically, I took Mike and Joni's suggestion, which was that you should do this for other people too, right? That you should move from here, get your own house, move people in there with you, and keep going. And I did. And when I opened up my first sober house, aside from the one that I lived in, actually, no, it was my second. I had them come over and visit the property, and it was so cool. Like, we were all teared up.
Was
and
that the Ohm house?
That was the tradition house.
Oh, the tradition house. Okay.
And, Mike and Joni just said after all these years, it's so wonderful. 14 years later, people are doing what we had suggested all along. And, it's been a really weird and really special journey for me to be a part of recovery housing. And then one thing else I'll add before I stop right now is just that I think that it's a more natural way to live. I really believe that communal housing in all its different forms is more natural than being locked alone in a little apartment by yourself. I don't really think that that's how humans are supposed to exist.
Yep. All right. How about you, Jack?
Hey, okay. That was great, Martin. I get to listen to you and reminisce, right? And think about back to the
Because you guys were in
beginning.
the house together.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. Right. I watched his entire journey, right?
Who
Short
else
of the
was
first
Matt,
28 days.
Nathan,
James.
Wes,
James, Matt
Matt.
Morgan,
and Matt S., right?
But no, he had already been
Okay.
gone by then. So yeah, man. So just like Martin, 2011, I went into a 28-day treatment facility. It was suggested that at the age of 47, which I think is important, coming from West Baltimore to a treatment facility in Carroll County, it was suggested that I leave there and go to aftercare. So I went to a place called the Howard House in Howard County, which is communal living. I thought my wife made that term up, but I'm glad to hear you use it. The Howard House suggested that, we stay in the continuum of care when we leave there. So it's funny how like my higher power has done everything for me when I couldn't do it for myself. So, our friend James that we just talked about.
Brad was at the Howard House.
Brad was at, and at Donnelly.
And at Donnelly.
Yeah. So my friend James is 6 months ahead of me, clean time wise, right? Same process, same treatment facility, same long-term Howard House. So it was his turn to move. And, we, with a common friend of ours, we helped move him to the Donnelly House. Now remember, I'm from West Baltimore.
Yeah.
So we put all his stuff in this forest and we go to the Donnelly House, which I had never been there before, right? And I look at this piece of property and I look at the men there and I meet Mike Elder and I say to myself that day, right, that this is where I want to come. I don't ever want to go. That's the next step. That's the next step. And, ironically, March the 9th, right, of 2011 is the day that I moved into the Donnelly House, which was 2 days ago because it was on my dad's birthday, right? So...
This podcast is perfectly timed.
It is, right? It's perfect. Everything about this thing is perfect, including the recovery housing. I loved hearing your story, because I would stay at the Donnelly House for about 4 years, and
Matt still has the record. He was there for like 8 years.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't beat him.
Yeah, he got, he didn't leave until he got married, right?
That's right.
Yeah, got his degree, college degree, got married, bought a house, now has 2 beautiful kids, and it's part of that forever family. Like Mike would always say, band of brothers, right? So eventually the Donnelly House wouldn't be enough for Mike and Joni, right? they would open up the Beechwood House, and you know the Facebook name page changed from Donnelly House to Donnelly and Beechwood Boys, right? Which the page is still running. However, you know, as things will progress in my recovery and my recovery life, after 4 years of being in recovery, I would get into a relationship, and this relationship will blossom into building credit, trusting another human being, and applying for for a loan for a house. Yeah. So when I got pre-approved, because I had started a career and things, right? And when I got pre-approved, and Martin walked me through this entire process, right? I would call Mike, because Mike had become, you know, our role model, Mike's father the figure, right? For sure.
We should just start calling him Michael.
I know,
Corleone.
right?
Michael Corleone.
Right. It's not Michael Corleone. How's it going?
I think he liked it. Johnny would like it too. Yeah. Anyway, he would say, "You didn't sign any papers, did you?" And I said, "No." He said, "Come around and see me." And he sold me the Beechwood House. It was a long process. And the Beechwood House consisted of me and 4 other people in recovery.
And I remember it was a stretch too. Yeah. And Jack, we had a couple conversations. He's like, "I'm not sure." Right. And I said, "Well, if you decide to say no, I'm going to say yes. So let me, you know, you're not getting that."
Right. You know, fear will rob me of my dreams, you know, but the topic of this conversation is recovering housing. And to this day, 4 years later, after purchasing the house, all the fears that I had, of having this piece of property and living the way that I was living have long gone by, right? There's, you know, so I understand the importance, because I want to wrap this up so we can get into the rest of the program. The foundation, the groundwork that Michael and Joni laid down for us, that Martin laid down, because you were in your process with the recovering housing before we purchased this property. I like to say that the same model from Donnelly and Beechwood House continues today through our experience.
Absolutely.
Both of our first experiences with transitional and recovery housing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So like my first topic is like how important is the need for like extended stay recovery housing just in the world, like not just locally, but we're very blessed around here. Like it's really starting to blossom into something that's very productive and effective. But a lot of places in the world don't have that. So, what words of wisdom do you have for that, or steps to take to make that into a reality like you did, Martin? We'll start with you.
Okay. I always like to say this. Great question, right? Something I probably haven't talked about. I like to use stories to explain, you know, something that I haven't talked about a lot in recovery is that at the age of 10, I was diagnosed with a tumor in my leg, right? And one of my legs was shorter than the other. But it was all in my step work, because that's where my low self-esteem process started, right? But however, when I started getting these surgeries and being homeschooled at a young age, but before I was able to come home from being homeschooled, I was in an environment with all other young kids who had different types of orthopedic surgery, meaning that like it was easy for me to recover from that it was easier for me self-esteem wise, right? To recover around people from that surgery who were just like me. Yeah. So I take that same concept with people who are in recoveries from substances and alcohol.
That's
right?
A perfect analogy.
Right.
That's amazing.
And it's funny how things like that can, you know, so I realized very early on, because I dove into the process of self-healing and self-determination, right? How important and the results that I saw from how important it was to have people who knew how I thought, knew how I felt, knew how I reacted, knew my, you know, why did they know it? Because they were just like me. Yeah. right? So it's, sometimes I can't see the picture when I'm a part of the frame, right? That's how I've heard self-deception explained, right?
Yeah. I'm going to throw out one of my favorite ones that Eric's going to hate is, the fish in the bowl doesn't know that it's wet.
Oh, man.
Yeah, because you're just.
I like that.
You're just surrounded.
That's
by
right.
It. Yep. You're too close to the problem.
Right. So Martin alluded to there was no more hiding, no more hiding, no more being invisible.
The human in the air doesn't.
Right.
Doesn't know that it's dry. There you go.
Yeah. So Martin alluded to there's no more hiding, no more being invisible. It's something about when you show up to a foreign place, right? When I came to Donley and then eventually purchased Beechwood, I had said, without knowing how my future was going to end up, that I ain't never leaving here.
Yeah.
And here is just a term for this place. Yeah. Like of communal living, not just the necessary structure that I was at that day.
It's not a destination. Right. It's a mind frame. It's a way of life.
Right. Yeah. I have my greatest success when our friend Chip always explains the posture of humility to me like this, right? Where I'm helping someone and I'm allowing someone else at the same time to help me because I'm always moving forward on this journey. Yeah. And like, how we throw this around loosely when we take a newcomer to go eat or treat them to a convention or something. Oh man, when I get paid my first paycheck, when I get a job, I'm going to pay you back. Yep. And you say, no, just do it for somebody else when you get in position. And that's how I live my life. And like, I still have 3 people in recovery living in my home with my wife and I today. And a lot of my friends are like, how could you do that? And I'm like, how could you not? You have a 5-bedroom house with you, your wife, and your dog, right? Yeah. So like it's the best thing that could ever happen for me, right? And it keeps me clean. It keeps me in recovery. It keeps me on my toes because the disease of addiction is it's insidious. Oh yeah. It will come and get me. It will have me thinking that I'm in a place where I don't need the rest of the world, right? But by me having other people in recovery just like me, they'll spot right when my behavior changes, because like the relapse doesn't start when we pick up the substance. So like that's why recovery housing is most important to me. I think.
And I'll add to that too, because I think it's worth saying that part of the value that we get out of the recovery house and what I'm hearing you describe too is the surrender to that process, right? Recovery is a long process, and part of the value that we get out of it is not necessarily what we want or what we end up with, right? For me, a lot of that was like a lot of uncomfortable conversations. Yeah. Not having all of the social skills at the end of my using, maybe that I had going into my using, I needed that structured care. I needed somebody to be able to say, you need to go to this many meetings. You need to eat on a regular basis. You need to be asleep at night, and maybe we should even talk about too, the different levels of recovery housing, because different people are at different stages in their recovery. For me, and in my housing programs, I have a for-profit side with the Ohm House and the Tradition House. I also have individual houses where people are basically, totally independent, but they're just living together socially with no even a house manager. Then we have the nonprofit side, and the nonprofit housing is like a self-pay, very similar to Donnelly House. Then I also work with treatment centers, which are, state-run, more like a medical facility that have higher level of care and are fully staffed. So we could sort of break down, those different levels, briefly. So, if you think about all of us just deciding to live in a house together, that would be like a level 1, right? Where we're all just volunteering. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm sure you know this better than I do, Jack. Level 2, the step up from that would be basically if a similar basis, there's rules, and there's, maybe urine tests on a regular basis. So we're accountable to one another.
That's more of a staff-based, long-term.
No. So a level 2 would be where there is a house manager and there are rules and there is structure that we all abide by, and specifically zero tolerance, right? That we're all in agreement that there is no using in the house. A level 3 is when you get up to what you think of as like staffed. And there's different levels within 3 for how high of level of care people need. And then when you get up to a level 4, that's really where you think about more like a rehab where you cannot leave, right? It's even if it's a voluntary stay, there's a process to even get outside.
You're still stuck for 72 hours.
Exactly. So when most of us are saying rehab, that's what we're thinking of as like the level 4. We went from
3.7.
A 3.7. Thank you.
D.
Okay.
3.7D detoxing and 3.7.
Perfect.
And then on another podcast, we'll break down what the 3 is and what the 7 is. That dictates your clinical needs, right? Some of the things that have to be, that are in demand from, that has to be, like how many meetings, how many individual clinical sessions you get with a one-on-one therapist.
Getting your mental health medication
so
balanced out.
That's what's broke down. By the time you reach 3.1, 3.2, which were the lower ends of the spectrum of the housing component that you talked about, you pretty much already have been through the structure part and you're trusted enough to not have a staff member on site to monitor, your medication. Because when you're in 3.1, 3.3, you come in and you're medically observed. No one divvies your medication out to you, but you're observed to get you into that, and this is why it's important to stay in that, what I described earlier, the continuum of care. Yeah. Because by the time you get to recovering housing, we need you. This is why I don't accept people. I didn't accept people at my house who didn't have a year already of continuous recovery, right? Because by the time you reach there, you're trusted. We have enough trust in you, right, that you don't even have in yourself yet to catch the bus to work and come home at night, to pay your rent. And by, let me share this quick story. When I lived at Donnelly House, I made enough money to pay my recovery housing, buy 2 packs of cigarettes and catch the bus to work each week. Yep.
Yeah, remember that.
Period.
Yep.
So the different levels.
So I think that's worth talking about because, most people who might have some experience with recovery housing, there's different stages and different people have different levels of need. So, and kind of like what Jack was saying, not everybody is necessarily ready for that level 2, or what Mike always called, Mike Corleone, he used to always call a 3/4 house, right? Because it's not a halfway house. We're not that. We're more further along in our recovery than that. We can trust each other, and things of that nature. So, and for me, most of the housing that I have on the for-profit side is exactly that. We've got guys that have already gone through treatment. They've already gone through structured housing. Maybe some of them even 6-9 months of more structured housing than they get to us. We still have structure, but it's not as controlled.
Yeah. It's more of a self-accountability type step.
And group accountability.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So with the two, I think, the benefits are that you have structure, that you have other people that are doing the same thing that you're doing. I think it's worth mentioning too that the zero tolerance is so crucially important. One of the things that I ran into early on was that I wanted to give somebody a second chance, right? He admitted to using, he was honest about it. He clearly didn't want to go back down that road. And I gave him another shot, right? Saying, okay, if you're serious about this, you're going to stay in the house. What I found out later on was that I had 2 more guys relapse, 2 guys that were friends with each other. And what they had seen was that this guy got a second chance. And immediately what's going on in their mind is that, well, if he got to stay, then once I get caught, I'll get to stay. Right. And then later on, another guy, he said the same thing. And he actually said it verbally to me. I knew I'd be able to have a soft landing. So I figured, why not? Right. And I realized at that point, that was it. Zero tolerance from there on out. And it really is. It's difficult dealing with the disease of addiction because most of my experience going through the house was uncomfortable. Right. If I was just trying to go to what felt right or what was easier or where my comfort level was, I would never have made it here today. That's right. Jack and James are both black guys, right? And they're large, right? James is what, like 6.5 feet tall? Yeah. And so, I'm like this little scrawny white guy.
Yeah.
I'm intimidated, right? I'm not secure in myself at all, right? I'm like, and these guys, Mike and Joni, leave the house meeting and they turn to me and they go, Mike and Joni own this place, but this is our house. Right? I'm terrified. I'm so glad you're here because otherwise I wouldn't tell the story. I'm so glad to get to tell it because it scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But what they were really saying, Jack and James were really saying, we really care about our community, right?
Yeah,
we care about the house that we live in. We care about recovery. We care about you actually doing the things that you're signing up and saying you're going to do so that you don't relapse. And people do.
They were taking a leadership role.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, and one of the things that I don't like to be missed with this work that we do, that was expressed through Mike and Joni's behavior, right? And Mike has said it to me. I treat my people good, right? Because when something goes wrong in that house, I don't have to catch them. The guys know how well I treat them and the product that we offer. They are coming to tell us when something's out of order.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Right. I think, Martin, you'll remember the night the guy took a certain type of pills and he came upstairs and told James, let me sit on your face. And then in the end, he had taken a bunch of pills and Mike said, well, how many pills did you take? And he said in the high 18s. Like, that's not even a thing, right?
I don't even know what that means.
Me either. Anyway. And Mike walked in the door for cake. It's funny how that happened.
Yeah.
He walked right in the door because we would get ready to call him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And one of the things that does come through is that behavior will always show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there's the reason
you can only hide for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yep.
And I think there's reason why, there's different levels of care because, some people, they might be court ordered or some people are just getting started in their recovery journey. It's different for everybody, right? So not everybody is going to go in and have the experience that Jack and I had, right? We were entirely ready,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
no matter what, to figure out the right way to live, to figure out how not to use, to rely on other people, to not rely on our own thinking, to do things differently, to go to meetings, to work the steps, all of that stuff. It takes time and the recovery house, the reason why it's an important part of the puzzle is because number one, if you can get out to a different place. Now they say you got to change people, places and things, but you always take yourself with yourself, right? There's it's like one of those dichotomies in the thing. But to me, I'm able to actually do something differently if I'm not in the same mindset. Mm-hmm. And so for me, like most of my using was alone in a house. Mm-hmm. If I went back to that same house, for me to be able to rewrite the neural pathways in my brain, right, which most of our triggers for using are deeply ingrained behavior patterns.
Yeah, they're emotional and psychological patterns that have been built up for years.
A great way to break that cycle is to physically be in a different place around different people who are acting a different way. How do I learn a new way of life? I'm big on practical application. The practical application of learning a new way of life is actually
living a new way of life.
Living a new way of life, being in a different environment.
Right. You create new waves, brain waves, processes as we go along.
All right. Now we're going to touch on the flip side of that coin, which is sort of like the dangers for people to look out for, because I think, like, we all heard about sort of the quote unquote factory farming recovery down in sorry, Florida, but you're a culprit.
You can call them out. It's fucking Florida.
Yeah, it was Florida for a long time. Like there are a lot of people out there that are not in it for the altruism and the actual good nature of it. So when people are in that desperate state, how important is it for them to not necessarily just take the first opportunity and do their homework on what they're getting into?
Yeah, definitely the reason why I feel compelled to be involved in recovery housing is because it made such a difference in my life and because there are bad players in the game. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of bad players out there. And I think one of the things that is changing, or at least I'd like to think it's kind of transitioning on its way out. There's a lot of people that realize they could collect money for the IOP, which is basically taking classes and counseling during the day. So a loophole that a lot of people found here and in other states was that you basically you bus people to IOP and collect their money. Mm-hmm. and you collect the money that the government is giving you or insurances are giving you in order to take those classes and take that the counseling. And what they would do is the house that they would then be put in would be unregulated.
Yes.
So the company is making their money off of basically stuffing as many people as they can. And, we've even seen like 24 people in a tiny townhouse, like stacked on top of each other, being bussed over to IOP. And I don't want to say that everybody who's doing that is bad. I'm like, I think there's a need on all different levels. Personally, I don't want to be involved in something like that because I see that there's too much room for the housing aspect of that to not be done correctly, to be abused, for the people to basically just be funneled in and out.
Yeah.
Right. Whoever's there doesn't matter. Whatever actual change they're trying to make in their life doesn't matter. When they go over to the trainings, they don't even really care if they're high or not. Those people are just signing numbers, collecting checks. I've even heard them say, out of their own mouths, this is a cash cow. I don't really care. And that to me turns my stomach, because this is truly a life or death.
Yeah, and it's taking advantage of people in the most vulnerable state.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that side of things is starting to go away. The model where we actually have housing and we have the counseling on site, everybody's there in an environment where they're together. I see that as a much needed piece, actually a very valuable piece of the puzzle for actually recovering and changing. And I think that's really just the sad part, is that, anytime you put extra government money on something, you can adapt the natural flow of how something would actually come about. Yeah.
So you're talking about transitional housing, particularly when you're talking more about how are we going to meet the needs of somebody? Like, there's a recovery house, right? Where like you're kind of feeling it, you're good. There's 3/4, and then there's like treatment. That transition house where you're still in the outside world, but you have kind of the foundation of a counselor, of, maybe not monitored, but
Jack might be the expert.
Like actual group therapy and counseling that's going to help you while you're in this house. Like, that's kind of what you're talking about, where there's like a missing piece. Because I know the treatment center, or one of the halfway houses I went to, that my wife also went to, which doesn't exist anymore, called Jewish Recovery House. They ran that model, but that shit didn't go well. Because like you had all that freedom, and like the counseling really wasn't, doing what it was supposed to do, right? Like you still had that freedom at night, but you didn't have that. I don't know. It didn't work. Like how do you figure that out for those people? Because there is a need for the person getting out of treatment and going into the recovery house. There is kind of this middle ground that people need to go to, but there isn't a lot of options for that.
So we need to go So we need to go from half to 2/3 to 3/4. Is that how we're breaking this down?
No, there's like, because like a 3/4 house and a half and like a halfway house. I mean, you're still kind of like out, but like there's a mix between a recovery house and a treatment center that I don't feel like there's enough options, where it's like people aren't ready to go back into like the world of a recovery house, but they're not necessarily ready to leave treatment. They still need like a little bit of hand holding. And they're just not that readily available. Like there aren't many houses like that.
And when I was breaking down those numbers, and Martin and I have had conversations lately about,
because you actually work with like the health department.
Yes. But I also, for the past 10, almost 11 years, have been working in a 3.1 facility. We all know the name of it, right? Which is exactly what you're talking about. It's the 3.1 level of care, right? It's that after inpatient treatment, and it's still classified as 3.3 and 3.1. Don't let the numbers confuse you. But what it is that we sit you still for a minute, get you comfortable with sitting still and not rushing back into society. Because one of the things that happens, let me explain it like this first. A lot of people, mainly women, when they get out of 28-day treatment, they're forced back into society where they have to get a job, pay their bills, eat, go to meetings, everything. So like what a 3.1 does, it gives you an opportunity to slow down. We get you regulated on your mental health medications or whatever. Some people need teeth pulled, eyeglasses, identification, birth certificates, all the things to prepare you for the transitional housing, right? So a lot of people miss that component. I believe when we're talking about success and numbers, when people come out of treatment and are handled properly by people who have been through the exact same things that we're trying to suggest to you, right? You have more of a success rate of landing somewhere that has a pretty solid reputation for not being a cash cow, for offering people just an opportunity. And why are they offering it? Because the people, Michael Corleone happens to have long-term recovery. So he has the empathy, right? He has the understanding.
You brought something pretty interesting though, with an issue kind of with like maybe recovery in general, like where it's like, okay, you get out 28 days and now it's like, all right, you got to get a job. You got to do this. You got to do that. Right. Not everybody's ready for that. Right. Yeah. You know what I mean? Right. Like, and
because those are big.
Those are big. Like, one of the big issues for me, I remember when I guess, I don't know, one of my times, but like my first time, my first real go with recovery, Fridays scared the shit out of me because I got paid. Right? That was a scary fucking day. And like you're telling people go back to work. That's how I get drugs, man. Yeah. Right? Like you got to kind of come to terms with some of that stuff. And some people just need to figure out their stuff first before they start working or going back to like real life. Right. There's a lot of damage there.
We have to completely change our old ways, right? Or go back to using. I didn't make that up. I didn't make this up either. That we have in one of the programs that most of us frequent, we talk about some indispensable principles, right? And we talk about honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, right? A person like me demonstrated the willingness, right, to do whatever I had to do, to have some success at long-term recovery, which was to go through the continuum of care. And that means change through a process of recovery, right? And I was given a lot of suggestions by people who were healthy in recovery. I heard a guy once say that suggestions are free, right? And I say this to 99% of my clients today in 3.1. Suggestions are free. The only ones that we pay for are the ones that we don't take, right? Meaning that if you come into my office and we're doing your treatment plan for your continuum of care, because we don't send anybody from 3.1 to PHP and transitional housing without an aftercare program. And what does that aftercare look like, right? First of all, when you don't take the suggestion, how you pay is through pain and making mistakes and repeating the vicious cycle all over again. The 3 men sitting at this table took every suggestion, and we haven't, gone back to in that stages of change where we hit the relapse and had to go through pre-contemplation, contemplation, all the rest of the stages of change.
Now I've done that with things that aren't related to drugs.
Me too. I just gave you a bag of candy.
Is that why you gave away the bag of candy?
Yes.
Well, my wife
delivered it to Mark.
He was 14 stepping you, dude. He's accelerating your body.
My wife was super stoked when I gave her that. She was like, "Where did this come from?" I was like, "It's from Jack." Like I guess he had an extra bag.
Right.
But okay, got it.
Speaking of which, I got to take one pause real quick because Joni just gave me a gift all the way from Germany, which was Kinder eggs, which I asked her for like 8 years ago. I was like, she forgot. It's cool, whatever. And he texted me. He was like, Joni got a gift for you, man. I'm like, no shit. I was like, oh man. I was like, I haven't had a legit German Kinder egg in probably 20 years. And I'm so excited about it. So thank you, Joni. Love you. But like going back to like your like actual medical, your surgery, that's such a great analogy because Eric, you have experience with that as well. Like
Yeah.
you go
I did
from
not know that you had that type of surgery.
Yeah.
no. But like, it's such a good analogy when you really break it down, because like you're actually like, you're getting the x-rays, you're getting the MRIs, you're going to the hospital. And then the next step of care, you got to start going to the physical therapy, and they always set you up. They give you a referral. Like, this is where you go. This is how you do. And then,
there's aftercare too.
and then there's aftercare.
Forever.
They give you the stress bands to like, this is what you need to be doing at home. And it because like, it's such an apt analogy, because both things are a medical condition. Like, fuck what the world is trying to tell you. This is not a criminal problem. This is a medical health issue. It's a human issue. It is a mental, spiritual, physical malady that millions of people suffer from, and we need to start approaching it clinically. And because a lot of people, a lot of our listeners don't necessarily know about these 3 I didn't know those numbers.
Well, there's a DSM.
Yes.
About 4, 5, and 6. We're up to 6, 7 will be coming out soon, right? And yes, the addiction is a disease.
Absolutely.
Period.
Yep.
So I think if we're talking to the individual, and kind of answering Eric's question about how would they know, I think most of it really is to just surrender, the paranoia,
being
and
honest with who you're talking to, being honest with the doctors and the jacks out there.
Absolutely. Because I was not able to discern whether or not to trust my counselor when I went into rehab. I had to just surrender to realize that I was not in a place to make decisions. And when we refer back to the stuff that was going on in Florida and some of these other bad facilities, what the main thing that came out of Florida was that they were actually having hookers bring the drugs into
there were people
the aftercare.
They were also paying for like the last dose, right?
Right.
And they were keeping people high in their shit to like keep pissing dirty so they could keep
They were questionable.
Billing for more UAs, all that shit.
I think if we're being honest, if you went into a structure like that, you would know that you were there, and you would have to make the decision to not participate in that. I don't think the individual is absolutely clueless to something like that going on. I think there's probably, let me tell you the truth though, I bet you there were people that came out of there clean too.
Right, exactly.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
people could definitely use that as like, oh, this is like, I'm going to stay clean. Like,
in spite
because
of all
this shit.
I know I would have, no matter what. That's where I'm at, right? No matter what, no matter what other people are doing. So the other part of that too, though, is that the benefit, and this is why I say that the 3.1 level of care is probably going to do away with the other ones, is because they're also nationally recognized. They're licensed and they are highly regulated.
Yes.
So I really think that's going to be the future. And I work with one too, but I'm not really a spokesperson for them. So I don't really want to, put their name out there. And truthfully, it's not really about advertising it, right? We're kind of talking about the 3,000 foot view of where to go. But I do think it is kind of like what Eric said, where the best course of action, the numbers that are coming out to show statistically the highest level of success, the best chance you have as an addict from going from using is to go to a detox, then go to the rehab, then go to the structured housing, and then eventually get into a house where you're basically independent and then ready to fully get a job and everything. And you're right, that is exactly the problem that we face is where's that middle ground? For so many years, our only option was to get into a Donnelly house and go right from zero. Literally, I couldn't stay awake all day. Right. When I got into rehab, I couldn't stay awake for a full day. I couldn't walk a mile. Right, without being exhausted and having to sit down. So, you go from that and all of a sudden you're expected to be able to get a job. And it's a lot. So, these other structured housing programs have those connections. They're able to get you onto, food stamps if you need them, reconnect with, parole officers or even just, the child care court to be able to get, where is my child support, right? And to handle that in a more structured environment. So it's not all that stress on you all at once. I mean, most of us, if we have like 2 or 3 things on our to-do list in our first week in recovery, it feels like the mountain is impossible to climb. The other thing too is the company that hired me on, part of what I'm doing for them is also putting together an adventure therapy. So we're going to have a big focus on having fun.
Yeah.
So like today, when I leave here today, I'm actually going for a hike around near the Potomac, right? And a whole bunch of guys are invited with me. I invite not just my recovery houses, but other recovery houses. And, thankfully the weather's warming up. But for me, that's like a huge part of recovery as well as having fun, not just the pressures of life, but how do I learn to have fun again sober? So hiking, camping, going to the go-karts,
rafting.
all rafting. Yeah, that was a big one from last year, which was a blast. So
have you ever done one of those like little like day camps where it's all about like team building and stuff, like little like small ropes courses and stuff?
Absolutely.
We did one. We did the
I want to do one of those again. I haven't done one of those in forever.
The Savage Race. What was that one we did?
Savage runs. Yeah, the mud runs. Yeah. So all that's going to be a big part of our curriculum, and not everybody's doing those types of things because again, we're focused on outcomes. We're focused on giving more than we necessarily have to, just what the state minimums are. So, maybe take that into account when you're interviewing a place or trying to find out what you're going. But I think really the bottom line for somebody is really just to surrender and take the suggestions of the counselor and try not to be too paranoid and just go with it, right? Go with the flow. And, if something's a red flag, talk about it with somebody. Don't just sit by. And here again, like part of recovery is not relying on my own thinking, which means that whether I think something's a good thing or a bad thing, I should be talking to somebody about it to make sure that I get a consensus of what other people think and not just what I think.
And I want to be clear, right? That Florida is not alone with places.
No.
California has their own stuff.
They're here as well. I can't tell you how many times I've picked up the phone and people are calling me saying, I have to get out of this place. Can you get me somewhere else?
Yeah.
It happens all the time, but however, another plug for Donnelly House, Mike and Joni, right, is that I can remember them for us new in recovery, right? Buying toilet paper, buying extra little food, things like ragu and SpaghettiOs and all that type of stuff, right? And when they open Beechwood and I say, no, you don't have to buy that stuff here. We're at a different level, but that same model still works today. It's important for people, and I'm blessed to be one of them who refer to these type of places to know where you're sending people. Know your product, man. Know your people because, there are a lot of bad places here, right? Within the 50-mile radius of where we sit right now who are just in it for the money. And that's okay for them because some people stay clean, and abstinent through that as well,
So I think, kind of one thing that you guys touched on is there's a bit of a one size fits all approach to these, right? Like it's kind of like this is the way we do it. There isn't like as much of kind of this unique approach to the individual. But kind of going back to also the relearning how to enter society, right? Like there's a big emphasis when you go through treatment or, whatever type of counseling, there's a big focus on drugs. What's the focus? And you guys have kind of talked about this. What's the focus of learning how to live again? Because when we're using actively hard using, my life wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't too normal, right? No. I didn't really know how to function. Right. But you gotta
there were even some points in recovery where you were like that too.
Sure. Fair.
Me too.
But I'm saying there's you have to learn these skills that people kind of overlook, right? But we have to relearn those. How are you guys kind of helping them through this process of drugs are a big problem, but you also have to learn how to live. You have to learn how to communicate with people. You
brush
have
your fucking teeth on a daily basis.
Yeah, there's all these things you kind of have to relearn how to do. And sometimes I feel the emphasis can be so much on drugs. It's not on the core issues or just how do I go back to just being a person?
So there are, and I'll let Martin jump on this. I'm gonna be real quick with this. There are multiple pathways to recovery, right? There is no cookie cutter, one wrench fits every nut type of thing with recovery, right? I have a lot of information about the different pathways and, alternate ways. However, most of them have this thing where people who have had success, and we all understand this, where we go to places societies, right? Meetings, right? Fellowshipping, and people share their experience, strength, and hope, right? So when people share their experience, strength, and hope, we take what we want from listening to them, right? What applies to us, like we say something like, if I want that, what they have, I got to do what they do. Right. So if your story matches my story, I can come to you and say, hey man, tell me how you did that. Yeah. Right. So that's how we get reacclimated to society. That's how, my first thing, I got a job, bussing tables and washing dishes at a restaurant. Somebody in recovery said, hey, I've been watching you. Mike Elder told me 12 years ago almost, Jack, life is an interview. Right? People are always watching you, right? So always do your best,
Because that's what recovery really is. Yeah. Like when people aren't watching, because you might spend an hour, maybe 2 hours in a meeting, right? And then you got 22 hours by your damn self.
There's a lot of people who share some good recovery but don't live a good life.
Right.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So when you hear people's experience, strength, and hope, you get with the winners. Right? Stick with the winners, man. I have been blessed to have you guys in my life. The entire time y'all been in recovery, right? We winners. Look what we're doing on a Saturday morning. I'm not down on Park Heights and Garrison trying to get one, right? So I stick with the winners. I stick with people who are carrying the message, right? And that's what we're doing here. We're carrying the message to somebody out there who will benefit from hearing about the process of recovery housing, right? Transitional living and how it has worked in our lives. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer because it is so, everybody's recovery journey is different. I think too, something that comes up for me a lot lately is just being able to respect other people for where they want their recovery to take them, right? Like my level of freedom is not somebody else's level of freedom. Where I'm going to stop is not where somebody else is going to stop, right? For some people, just getting rid of the drugs and still keeping their old way of being, that is what they want. Yeah. That's where they're going to stop. And it is up to them, right? Yeah. That individual, part of the benefit of going to 12-step programs is definitely learning willingness, right? How important that willingness and being honest with where we are. Like, how do you get better if you're not willing to admit, right? And be honest with yourself about where the problem is. Well, teaching somebody to brush your teeth. And what am I going to do? Hold the toothbrush in your mouth every day? You know what I mean? I can't really teach you to brush your teeth every day other than set an example and and I like
that's what I do for my daughter, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I like that as an example though, because
her milk addiction is just off the charts nowadays. We're going to have to talk about this.
But yeah, there's something too that you reminded me of, which is Virginia is starting to do something I'm really excited about. They're offering the state to pay for peers. And Jack could do a better job of, I'm not a peer, but I believe Jack is. He could do a better job of explaining, but it's basically like a certification that you take through the state in order to become a peer support advocate. Am I saying that right?
Certified Peer Recovery Specialist, CPRS.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what Virginia is starting to do is they're actually paying them to go out to the recovery houses. So one of the models that I came up with for our nonprofit was a position in addition to the house manager, because a house manager position is very complex, right? A house manager has to make sure people are doing their chores, has to call them out and, on a weekly meeting, make sure that they're actually going to their meetings and are they working with their sponsor and giving good suggestions and also being a friend because they live in the house together. And it's like a very complicated, it takes a very special person to be a house manager and set that leadership from the top, right? So in addition to that, how do you structure and have an actual plan for somebody's recovery and new life, right? Well, that should be a different person. And there are groups that are starting to catch on to this and starting to do this. And Virginia is actually starting to pay for that peer support. So what I wanted to have, and I came up with this idea, I thought on my own, but other people are doing it as well, is have somebody go out and meet with everybody on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. I was going to do bi-weekly, and it would be one person to go and visit all the houses and be able to actually go over their plan. Right. So an actual practical to-do list. What am I trying to achieve next? And what actions am I taking to get to that. So if I need to get a job, how many interviews am I planning on going on this week, and actually checking in with them on a regular basis to make sure that they know that, and to make sure that they've got connections to those resources. So Virginia taking the action and actually paying for that support to go out there, I think is phenomenal. Here again, most people that are becoming peers are actually one of us, right? They're a person of recovery themselves. And I think that is so crucially important that the people that are involved in this, for me personally, I don't want to open up a house and work with somebody who's not one of us. Right. That's just for me.
Right.
Yeah, it's
right?
the first time
even
I
if
went to a counselor was they were an addict.
Yeah, same.
A recovering addict.
Same.
Yes. And it goes all the way down to, the most basic one addict helping others without parallel is without parallel, right? We need to be involved in things at this level. So I think part of that though is really there again, the accountability that you get in the house, right? If there's, 8 or even 16 guys living together in a house and one guy is not showering on a regular basis. I know probably most of my guys are going to listen to this, so I'm not going to say any names, but you probably know who you are.
Shower up, Stinky.
Other guys will say something. I think that's one of the benefits of being together is having other people, and that's communal living, right? But there again, the leadership coming from the top. If you're a loving and caring person who's implementing the policies from the top, the people that are actually there on a day-to-day basis, they're going to carry it out with each other in a loving and caring way. If you're somebody who has a house and you're a tyrant and you go to the house meeting every Sunday and you just yell at everyone, they're not going to treat each other in a loving and caring way either. Right. So, and I think there again, it's just really important that, because if you're a person of recovery, you should be working on those spiritual principles in your step work, and you should be, changing and growing and letting those spiritual principles be your guide on how to handle each situation. And, some of that stuff, some people just might not want to actually take care of their teeth the same way that others will. But most of the time, what we try to do in the houses, especially with cleanliness, because I don't take it for granted that some people come from different upbringings than others, right? Some people, their parents were just really messy people and they never got taught how to take out the trash and when to take out the trash. Or, my mom always said, leave your campsite cleaner than you found it, right? So that's a big principle where we go into a room and you don't just pick up after yourself, but if you see a little bit of crumbs that somebody else missed, you clean those up as well. And the house, and that's out of respect for the house, right? I respect you, you respect me. We have respect for the house as a whole. So let's actually look out for each other and keep these things up. But the other day, I shouldn't say, this was maybe a month ago, and I don't mind sharing this story. It had come up a couple times at house meetings that the bathroom was not getting cleaned the way it was supposed to be cleaned. And so after the meeting, the guy whose job it was, I went up to the bathroom with him and I said, does the bathroom look clean? And he's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's clean. Right. And I said, okay, well, let's look at the urinal. Does that look clean to you? Yeah, it looks clean to me. Okay. Do you see the yellow kind of like orange stuff that's like caked right here?
Yep.
That's bacteria. We need to clean that. And I said, actually, if you look in the shower, it's that same kind of yellow orange type of bacteria. It's not real bad, but if you look at it, it's there. So I got the scrubbing bubbles and I got the rag and I got down on my hands and knees and I scrubbed the toilet and the bathtub in front of him. And I did that because I'm not going to take it for granted that he knows what I know, right? I don't want to make an assumption that because I say do this chore that you really know what that chore entitles in totality. So let's take the time to actually learn those behaviors. And laundry is another big one. I can't tell you how many washers and dryers I've replaced because some people think that a washing machine works better when you stuff all of your laundry from the last 4 weeks in there as hard as you can. You use your foot and you stand on top of it to close the lid and then you turn it on.
Come on, man. People don't do that.
Over and over and over again. So, part of the way we came up with that too is to have a sample hamper next to the washing machine.
We're going to have to teach
put the stuff in there first.
I'm just.
I mean, we can't assume that our kids are going to know this shit because they're not. They're going to be idiot 13-year-olds.
Fair.
Yeah.
You say
just the standing on top of a washing machine trying to get it to close. Like it's like there's probably going to be a problem. Like you've seen it in like television millions of times where it's like, oh no, the washing machine has gone over. It's like
I'm just thinking of like those shitty infomercials where they try to like pour milk and they pour it all over the counter. How do I stop doing this?
Well, even saying to somebody like, hey, do the dishes.
Right.
You know, for some of us, that means you rinse the dish off before you put it in.
Right.
You know, for other people, if they don't know that, they might not like, why is the peanut butter still stuck all over the spoons when we take it out?
Right.
Well, we didn't rinse it off. You know, those little things, I think it is.
Who doesn't eat all the peanut butter off the spoon is my question.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
I lick the spoon dry.
Yes, there is
And then
no
it goes-
remnants of peanut butter on there.
And then it goes in the dishwasher,
Right.
knowing that it's good.
Not even sitting in the sink previously,
Right.
but like as soon as I'm done with the peanut butter, that's
Right,
proof.
okay.
There ain't no peanut butter.
That's
left in
right.
the spoon.
Yeah. It's after
Yes.
use. Not like, oh, there's some peanut butter in this like dishwater real quick. Grab that.
Here's a tidbit, right? Because, you know, I don't like to talk about, I do like to talk about myself, but like, because I've gone through every hoop in recovery. So being a house manager at the 3.1 place that I came through before Donnelly House, there was this guy, and I used to go to the director because like I would facilitate a Sunday meeting where we go over chores, and part of my responsibility was to look at every room every morning. And this guy would never make his bed, and I'd be like, you know, why you ain't making your bed? So the director called me into his office one day. He said, Jack, do you think there's a chance that he doesn't know how to make a bed? Right. He said, why don't you go talk to him and ask him, does he know how? And if not, show him how to make it. Right. And I did like you did with the toilet, right? At the Howard House, right? I went in there and I showed him how to make a bed, right? And I never had that problem again. Like, that's
I had a question because jail is a part of your story.
Yeah.
So how much did that? So because you had to make your bed,
Right,
like
yes.
you had your 12 by 12 or whatever that you had to keep
Right.
clean because nobody's gonna fucking clean it for you.
Well,
was that part of like how? Like, was that something that helped you later?
for sure, but not only jail, because it came up in our conversation here that like,
Because your dad was also in the military. Yep.
That's where I was going with that. Like some things I learned.
I know a little bit about
Right,
Jack.
that's right.
I heard his story once.
He's like the drill sergeant still, right? So yeah.
Pack your bags. There you go.
Right, there you go.
Good luck.
So yeah, man. When you don't assume, right, Mike, if you know, if you send an email to Mike or you talking with Mike Coleon, right, he'll say,
That's so great.
you feed a man, you cure his hunger for one day. You teach him how to fish and you teach him how to live life, right? So that's what I use that in every area with helping someone trying to broaden their perception of what long-term living life is about. I only want, you know, we don't come to recovery to stop using drugs and alcohol. Of course, we have to do that. We come here and we learn how to start living life again without the use of whatever you want to put behind that. Yeah. So we teaching people in that continuum of care and recovery housing and things, how to live life again, how to not, you know, how to pay off your child support, how to pay off your debt, you know, how to not have your cell phone turned off, how to, part of my story was in 30 years of active addiction, I never finished one tube of toothpaste or hair grease or one of the other. You know, I was always transitional housing in abandoned buildings. So yeah, man, teach a man how to fish.
All right. So along those lines about like asking for help and everything, a lot of us are adults when we get into these scenarios. Like we're not 17, 18-year-old kids, although that happens as well. I mean, how old were you when you like got into that transitional housing?
29.
29. You were
47.
I think I was about 30 days away from my 30th birthday.
Yeah, you're grown fucking men. So how did you have to cultivate that posture of humility to be able to ask for help? How did you, what sort of exercises or what did you have to do in order to become willing to ask for help and take direction in a new way of life?
So I'll tell this story real quick. We're talking about the Donnelly House a lot. So when I got there, very solid house, right? Guys had solid recovery, clean time. And I'm the new guy. And there was we had a meeting out on the back porch and this alumni came by for H&I. He said, you know, I want to take somebody with me. Who wants to go to the jail?
Right. I remember that.
And I was terrified.
Yeah.
And it went around the room.
Scrawny white guy.
Right. Went around the room.
Jail.
What do you want to do? Will you do it?
Mhm.
Nope. I got a job.
Right.
Will you do it? Nope. I got plans with my parents.
Right.
Will you do it? Nope. I'll be out of town. It was like everybody had something to do. And it gets to me. I'm the last guy. Are you going to do it? Yes. Right. Like, because that was the humility, right? What they told me is if you're asked of the program to do something, do it, even if it's uncomfortable. Say yes. So I said yes. A couple months later, there was a guy in the house who had a heart attack, and he passed away in his room. And I was in a room that was about the size of a shoebox. It's all mine, but it was a shoebox, and I could hear him snoring and breathing through the tiny thin wall. And he passed away, and there again, it went around the room. Hey, do you want to take Chris's room? No, not a chance.
Right.
Do you want to take Chris's room? No, he died in that room. I'm not going in there. Do you want to take his room? And they finally got to me, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll definitely take his room.
Fireplace and all.
Fireplace, sliding glass door. It was a great room. I couldn't believe everybody said no. And
To be fair, you are at some level of a spooky, creepy guy.
I guess so.
From time to time.
Well, it's like the mannequin and like
Right.
Yeah.
they're good.
Manny was in the room with me.
Right.
Yeah, Manny lived.
Was Manny at your recovery house?
Manny lived there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Manny lived there too.
Yeah.
So he's an alumni. That's good for him.
That's a good point.
Legitimately, right.
That's a good
We got to
point.
remember that.
Manny still lives at the tradition house too.
Right.
Yeah, he's got clean time too.
Yeah.
So when I got into the room, it was covered in spiders.
Right.
So, and I mean covered,
Right.
and all the, when they have the babies and there's like the ball of spiders.
Oh yeah.
I mean, thousands of them all over the room. So there was like this sense of pride though that I had.
I own
Putting
all
in
these
this
spiders
effort.
now. I have an army of spiders.
I cleaned up the room, and it was something very special about that. Paying respect to Chris, who didn't die
Right.
from using. He died of a heart attack. He died naturally.
Yeah.
So there was like this sense of pride and this kind of peace that came with getting that room for me. And I think there's just a willingness,
Mhm.
right? There's a willingness that comes with
Yeah, man.
going there.
Yeah. These new stories, these not new stories, but these reminiscing, going back down memory lane from the formulative years of our early recovery, right? For me, if a person can hear with that recovery ear, right? Because we learn how to listen and listen to learn. That's the roadmap, right? We give you a roadmap for what definitely works.
Mm-hmm.
There's some other ways that may work, right? 60-40, 30-70, 50-50. But what we're telling you right now worked. Do everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Take all suggestions. Don't skip over anything, right? And you too, through going through that whole continuum of care, right? Because had I missed any part of any part of whatever I went through to get to where I'm at, right? I wouldn't have the fortitude or the resilience, right? To stay here, right? I would think that enough is enough, but no, that's not what we do, right?
Well, let's be honest too, right? If you or me had grown a bigger ego as we get better, we probably wouldn't be where we are today too,
sure.
right?
No,
because
for sure.
the humility aspect of it, I've been shown this so many times by my higher power. I have to stay humble.
Yeah.
So if I don't stay humble and be willing to clean the toilet with the next guy, if I don't stay there, then I will be humiliated, right? And I will be brought down to the next level, and it'll be painful. And I just, there again, I don't need to learn that lesson over again, right? I'm just willing to stay humble. And I don't know how you teach anybody humility other than just by example.
Yeah. Demonstrating it. I love that, man. And it keeps me here. When guys that still live in my place, right, come to me regularly and over and over again say to me, I love living here. Like, I love what you do for us here, right? I go sit usually like on the deck out back or something, right? And just look and say that that's what I do this for, right? Of course I got a nice, beautiful home and family and stuff like that. but to offer the opportunity to someone else who's just as deserving and needing as I was, right? Because like, had I left before I did, when I, started to get my legs back up under me in early recovery, had I not had people handling me, like Mike and Joni and, my counselors at the centers and stuff like that, I would have missed the miracle. You know how they say, I still say to myself and to my wife and to people who I help, don't leave 5 minutes before the miracle. You could never have told me that I was going to end up a certified peer recovery specialist, a registered peer supervisor, right? A supervisor at a government facility in Howard County, things like that, right?
Extremely vital member of our community and of the county.
Yeah.
Right.
Governor Matthews.
I know, right? And
that's why I specifically picked
running soon.
Yeah.
I'm going to start calling you Lieutenant Governor. However,
that reminded me of a moment you and I had down at Ocean City, and I'm sure you remember it. We were at Mike and Joni's place at the convention, and we were the first people up, and we were out on the balcony just looking at, and like Ocean City's fine,
right?
But like it could have been London, Paris. That's what it was for us at that time. We're like, how the hell did we like?
Martin was there.
Martin was there.
Hadn't woke up yet.
I'm going this year too.
Are you comparing Ocean City to London?
Yes.
At the time, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
It was the fuck. We were in the Buckingham Palace, man. It was fucking amazing. The Mike and Joni flat down at the convention. That place was amazing.
It was unreal.
You were coming from jail. I was coming from jail. I was like, how the fuck did we get this good? That we're watching a sunrise on an amazing balcony that like Mike and Joni. Oh,
and we still do that type shit. And that's what you were talking about. The go-kart races, the white water rafting, the trips with, networks of people, especially the guys and some women who are in transitional and recovery housing. We just showing them this is how we live. Mm-hmm. Like when we tell our stories, like I was a homeless bum, been through prison, been shot up, beat up, stabbed up. That's how I was living, right? I'm not living like that anymore because I've taken the suggestions and done what these people
I can't
told
even
me
see
to
that
do.
guy.
Right.
I never could because you're my predecessor, so I never saw that guy. And like hearing your story, I was like, how were you that guy?
And there's nothing better in my life now than getting to watch the lights come on for somebody else. For one of the other guys that come into my house and to watch them grow and change, right? Mm-hmm. It's not me doing that, right? It's them and it's their higher power and it's their program and it's their network, but is the most beautiful thing to get to watch in real time. And you never know who it's going to be. You don't know who's actually going to get it. You don't know who isn't. But it's the most beautiful thing to get to watch. And people do recover. People do change. Mm-hmm. This is something that is achievable, that anybody can have. And Jack and I, we stick and stay, right? We just stay and we stay a part of, and you don't really know if you're doing the right thing for the right reason, you don't know where it's going to go. Right. And I think that's the example that Mike and Joni set for us too, right? We didn't know that we'd all be sitting here today. Mm-hmm. Our sponsor, David, was also a Donnelly House alumni, right? So the support that they built, they just opened a house. They just did the next right thing that they were supposed to do. And the ripple effects that it has, even if that means you're just opening the door for somebody and smiling and saying good morning, right? Mm-hmm. That ripple effect of doing the next right thing for the right reason, it does have big effects, even if you'll never know.
Right. Mm-hmm. Remember we had you talked about, we had a sheet of paper that we had to get filled out each week to bring to the house meeting, right? And what was your service work for the week, right?
What meetings did you go to? Right. What service work did you do? What did you do for fun?
Fun, yeah.
And what did you do with your sponsor?
Yeah. They were the questions you had to answer every week. And sometimes it would be as simple as I held the door for a lady at the grocery store. Yeah. I put somebody else's shopping cart because like when we get out of self-centeredness, right, and become more selfless, giving of ourselves to help someone else. Man,
we can be that change that we want to see.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we could talk literally all day.
Right,
All right. So we're gonna have one more quick topic to wrap this all up. Just talking about like the connections you've made and like maintaining those ideals and principles in your lives in their lives, like the future of recovery living and like how it blossoms? Like, what's it like?
So, I imagine the future of what it'll be like, and I imagine the opposite, and the opposite to me looks like kind of what I think there's a large push for in our society, which is that you keep everybody locked alone by themselves, high, and playing video games. Yeah. I think there's a big push in our society to have, a very easily controlled population of people that don't think too much, and they go to work or whatever they're supposed to, and then they get high and they sit in their house and play video games alone.
Sweet. What was that?
I don't know. That's not the future that I like to envision. I guess, other than the, how the housing looks, I think it'll be much the same because, we need one another. We need to be around other human beings, and being able to do that, clean, to be able to do that as the person I'm really meant to be. The only way for me to do that is to do that clean, to do that without substances. A big part of what I also see coming in the near future is also, the spiritual aspect, which doesn't have to be religion. I would even say for me that the biggest part of that is meditation. Yeah. And part of what I just brought to my home group this past Thursday that I was really nervous and excited about was breath work.
It was challenging. That one was challenging. I've done some, but like not like that.
And what type of breath work?
So similar to like the Wim Hof method, pranayamic breathing, just kind of like rhythmic. And you do a couple rounds of rhythmic breathing, preferably deep rhythmic breathing, and then you don't breathe. And you literally can sit for, I've had times where I haven't taken a breath for 4 minutes in just a relaxed state. And it definitely has, Wim Hof calls it getting high on our own supply. There's definitely a transcendental aspect to doing breath work. There's something very natural. And sometimes I actually think maybe this is why I liked smoking weed so much, is because of the breath work that was involved in the weed smoking. Might have had more of effect than the shitty weed I was smoking. But I do see that as part of the community, is that we'll be able to incorporate more practices that are just healthy, natural, that feel good, and they're easy and free. Why do we not see, more push for hiking and breath work? Well, it's free. You can go up and look at the sky at night. Why isn't that pushed more? Well, nobody can make money trying to push it. So
breath work's a little complicated too for most people.
Yeah.
Like it's not an easy thing to start getting into.
No.
Because it does sometimes require you to quiet your mind, and people are not fans of that.
But like my opinion on like the future of like recovery and recovery housing and just community-based recovery in general is that with the advent of like we're still in the infancy of technology, and we're still figuring out how to use it and figuring out how to use it in good ways. And there are lots of good ways. There's podcasts out there. But there's tons of people in this with you. Like you can talk to people all over the world via whatever and get their meditation suggestions, their recovery suggestions. They don't even necessarily have to be the same modality as you. I've learned from gamblers. I've learned from sex addicts.
Fucking crazy.
Gamblers are fucking crazy. We have a lot more in common with them than you realize.
They're fucking crazy.
Just the willingness to learn from a whole universe of recovery and not necessarily just what's available within 10 miles of us. Is really a cool future that I see, and I'm a part of it. And it's very cool. And what you guys do is amazing. Like you're not changing the world, quote unquote, but you are.
They're changing people's worlds.
You're changing people's worlds, exactly.
Right.
You're changing individuals' worlds, and you started by changing your own worlds. And
I love that.
how many times has Herb talked about the ripple effects and how they interact with everybody?
Right.
And now we get to be those positive ripples in other people's lives, like Mike and Joni, because sadly, they're not going to be here forever.
Right.
And, you know,
None of us will be here forever.
None of us
We're
will
all
be
gonna
here forever.
die.
And hopefully
every one of us will
hopefully
die.
this podcast inspires somebody else to, you know, take the next steps and be the Martin and Jack in England or wherever.
Yeah.
You know, we need these places all over the place, and hopefully, like, we're here to inspire that change.
And if you can find me and you want to talk to me, I'm happy to.
That's right. Yeah, same.
Yeah. So what do you think about, like, the future and how important?
I everything that Martin thought and what you just said, but I'll you know, I like stories, right? Weekly, I take candy, not only to Eric and his beautiful wife, right? All right, but I take it to the doctor.
Maybe try fruit next time. Get a bag of oranges.
Candy.
Okay.
Because it's candy, because it's people new in recovery that I take it to, right?
Oh, that's brilliant.
Right?
Oh,
yeah, because they need that
I take it to the Donnelly house every week. Tradition House gets their own. Occasionally, Martin.
Are there requests for candy?
Now, yes.
No, what's the most common request?
Yeah.
More.
Yep.
And I mean that, right?
Yep.
Because it's donated to me.
Yeah.
Right? I don't get to choose what kind it is, but the point is, I'm talking about visual, right? We're talking, you remember your question, right? We lost a friend last week, Theo, who I've done his podcast as well. Theo, from day one with me, has told me, Jack, stay in the middle of the herd, right? If you stay in the middle of the herd, you won't get picked off, right? So that's what I do. That's one of the examples of me staying in the herd, being visible to the new people coming through exactly what we went through. Because I look at the guys at Tradition and Home House and all that as coming through exactly, you know, they part of our family, you know what I mean? So as long as they get to see and hear us share our experience, strength, and hope, then, you know, like I said, just maybe this thing can work for me. I want them to think when I share my experience, because that when I give them a bag of candy, it gives us an opportunity to have a conversation, right? For me to instill some hope in them that they haven't found in themselves yet, right? So that's how I see the vision of transitional recovery, how it's going. You know, like as long as you have people doing the work, we'll see people reaping the benefits from it years from now. Right? The Donnelly model. Right.
The Donnelly model.
Right.
Some of these are, there needs to be a study on
for
that.
sure.
All right. Well, we are about out of time, but we would like to again thank Martin and Jack for joining us today.
Thank you. Again, always an honor.
Oh yeah, love you guys. And I'm not going to do the whole spiel at the end.
No, you don't have to. We're going to change it anyway. So.
Oh,
I know you're going to be sad because you wrote it, but we're going to change it.
very good. Good.
All right.
Everybody, thanks for joining us. Go to all of our social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, more information about us, podcastrecovery.com, like, share, subscribe, become part of our family, become a Patreon member because we are self-supporting and need help keeping the mics on. Like, share, subscribe. Most importantly, everybody out there, stay safe and stay clean.